All right, can everybody hear me? Raise your hand. If you're in a, I can hear you, I see. Some people can hear me. No, lots of people can hear me. That's all cool then. All right. So today I wanted to talk about a winning listing presentation. I'm going to talk about some of the different ways in which you can present a listing presentation and what might be important. And there's some handouts that you've got. If you're in my coaching program, mentoring program on my team, you're going to have access to some of the originals. If you're not, then you're on your own. But it's just sort of it'll be a template that you could follow. So what I want to start with is there's a handout that says a winning listing presentation. And one of the things that about real estate that is both exciting, let's say, and potentially frustrating is there's a lot of different steps. And so what I mean by that is, and we're going to cover all of these eventually in the program, but you need to have people that are interested in selling their homes, right? You need to have a marketing strategy, a follow-up strategy, and we're going to cover that with some landing pages, squeeze pages, and other things that are available. And then what will happen is somebody's going to say, a lot of times it's a phone call, and they'll say, I'm interested in selling my home. I'd like you to come over and talk to me. Now, we're going to go through in another session how you handle that call and what kinds of questions that you're going to answer. What I wanted to concentrate on today is what do you do once you show up at the listing appointment? Now, next week, I'm going to be talking about how to prepare a CMA. It's called the Art of the CMA. And for those of you that don't know, CMA stands for Country Music Awards. Wait a second, that's not right. A comparative market analysis. And I'm going to go through the 5 different ways of valuing property and how to do all of that process, plus a discussion on some pricing strategies. We'll touch on that a little bit today. But so today we're not really going to do that, right? Not really. But we're going to talk about what do you do once you show up. Now, I like to start with old school. I don't know why. And in old school sales, there's always 4 steps. And the first step is to build rapport. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? Once you've built rapport with people, the next step is to qualify them. And what we're doing when we're qualifying them is we're identifying what problems they may have. Because the reality is if people don't have problems when it comes to buying or selling real estate, then they don't need real estate agents. And your view should be that of somebody who's solving problems, right? So what kinds of problems do the seller have and how would you help solve them? And that's in the showing step, right? We build rapport, we identify what their issues are, we show them how we can help them with their issues, and the close is simply getting them to make a decision. So what I'm assuming is that you've talked to them on the phone, and we're going to cover that in another session, but let me just say this. When you're talking to somebody on the phone, there are certain questions you ought to ask them, like 1, why are you thinking of selling your home today? 2, have you done, I ask people, describe your home, right? Describe it, right? Because many times what they describe is not what you find in the county records, right? Have you made any improvements? And, a few basic questions, right? Which would help, but we're going to cover that, and I actually have a sheet that you could use to write down the information. But now we have an appointment, right? And I'm going to share with you what the preparation materials that I'm, sharing with you, but you should arrive on time, right? I usually would arrive early to a listing appointment. And by the way, if you arrive early, don't park right in front of their house, right? So that they could see you out there for 15 minutes sitting in your car, park around the corner maybe, if you get there a little bit early. You knock on the door, take a step back, right? I'm assuming we're doing this in person. There was a thing last year where we were going to do all of these virtually. I have a virtual presentation, but we go and talk to the people most of the time. You could take a little more of a pushy attitude where you say, hey, thank you for inviting me tonight to list your home. Some people find that a little too pushy to discuss putting your home on the market, whatever it is you want to say. That's what's called more of a sharp, assumptive close. Now, if I walk in and I'm carrying some materials, I would ask if I could put them on the kitchen table. You don't want to sit at the dining room table, particularly if they've got something big in the middle. You don't want to sit on a couch when they're across the room and on a coffee table. It makes the whole thing much more difficult. In addition to the schematics, if that's the right word, there's a difference in the way people react depending upon their environment. So the dining room table and in the living room area is probably where they talk to guests. They're more comfortable, more used to making decisions at the kitchen table. You might have some materials that you're going to show them. You want to sit at the kitchen table, right? And we're going to talk about arranging the chairs. You just want to be in a place where you could show them what it is you want to show them. Ask for a tour. Right now, sometimes there are different theories about doing listing appointments. There's the one step, and then there's the two step. You know, that was originally from Texas, as I recall. But the two step would be you go there first and do an analysis. I'll discuss how that could work if you totally mess up your CMA, your comparative market analysis. We're going to save that. In our market in Silicon Valley, people are way too hyper to do two-step. You just go there, right? You know, usually we just show up. Now, there's some downside to that in that you haven't seen the house before. I tell people, pretend I'm a buyer, show me your home like you were a real estate agent, pointing out whatever you think a buyer would be interested in. And then they sometimes laugh and they go through and they show me things. And as some of you may know, and if you don't, you ought to know, is I actually have a real estate school. So I like to say afterwards, I said, well, that was great. You did a fantastic job. Have you ever considered, you know, getting into real estate? It seems like you're a natural at this, but we want them to give you a tour. Now, by the way, a lot of what I'm going to say contradicts a lot of what other people are going to say. Right? It's just the way it is. There is more than one idea of how this ought to be done. And you'll hear, if you listen to enough classes on how to do a listing presentation, some people will say you just have them sit at the table and you do the walkthrough yourself so they're not wasting your time. I don't agree with that. Not only do I want to hear what they think is important about their property, I'm also looking for things that might help me with rapport, but we don't want to overdo that, right? Just because they have flowers and you like flowers, that isn't necessarily a reason to talk about flowers, right? Let me know what will stay with the property when it sells. And also, what was it about this property that caused you to buy it? That's a very important question. And when we get to where we're talking about objections, that might come back and help us, right? It might. We want to know what they think is important. And building rapport is when you're asking. Ford is an old acronym. I've also used FORM, F-O-R-M, where you're asking about their family, their job, recreation. Dreams is one thing, M would be motivation. I actually once worked out formula, but you know, it's just, I was bored, right? So the idea is you want to check with them. We're building rapport a little bit. We would like to know why they bought this home in the first place and why are they selling it now, all right? Make notes along the way, improvements, repairs, and things like that. Don't volunteer at this point staging or repair suggestions, right? But just make notes. Now, sometimes I use a blank piece of paper And underneath it, I have printed out the multiple listing service usually has a data entry form, which has a whole bunch of check marks and things. And the reason I take that with me is because when I list the home, I'm going to be asked to to answer all those questions. And so sometimes it helps as I'm going through to mark it off. You go back to the kitchen table, you want to sit in such a way, you don't want to be sitting in the middle with one on that side and one on the other side. So you're having to go back, like watching a tennis match, because when you're looking at one, the other one may be making faces at you, that sort of thing. You want them oftentimes to be, I prefer to be off to the side, right? So that if they're sitting someplace, I'm sitting a little bit off to the side rather than necessarily across from them. Let them know it's going to happen, right? Which I'm going to talk a little bit more about. Now, many times, if you take a class on how to do a listing appointment or a listing presentation, they're going to tell you to take control, right? You're going to tell them what's going to happen today. This is our agenda. I'm going to talk about this, and then I'm going to talk about that. And then when I'm done with that, you can ask me questions about this, and then we'll make a decision. How does that sound, right? That's a typical approach. I have found that that is not the best approach. So a lot of times I've even coached agents who want to practice their listing a presentation. By the way, if you're in my mentoring program, my coaching program, or on my production team, right, I'd be happy to do this. And usually they've been watching classes and things like that, and they start off with, this is my agenda and this is what I want to accomplish today. And my suggestion is to ignore that. What my suggestion is that you ask them, what is their agenda for today? What would they like to learn? What's most important to them? And my suggestion is, if they say, this is what we want to know, talk about what they have as their important issues, their agenda first. Now, a lot of times that might be price. And I know I've been to a lot of classes, believe me, real estate classes, and they'll oftentimes tell you, don't talk about price to the end. I think that's a mistake, because if the clients say to me what they want to know more than anything else is what their property is likely to sell for, and you say, I ain't going to tell you that until you hear my presentation, I'm not really sure that's a good way to do it, right? So if they, whatever it is that they say, I ask them, do you have any questions that you'd like to start with? What's your agenda today? What's important to you? What would you like to accomplish, right? And then I'll take notes and I'll write them down, talk about that, right? And then there's a listing presentation, there's a manual. Let me see if I have my example here. So when I go on a listing appointment, I oftentimes, and it kind of depends on who the people are, I might just bring a folder or a binder with printed material, but a lot of times I take my Chromebook, right? And the Chromebook or other tablets, this has a pretty good sized screen. I have my phone on with the Wi-Fi, and it's going to boot up. What it allows me to do is to do a presentation using PowerPoint or whatever, using the laptop, right? This is, I guess, a laptop. It would work on a tablet. The problem with taking a regular laptop is how are they going to see the screen so that you see the screen? Maybe you could sit between them, and maybe you could have it over to the side. I've done that. But the thing about the Chromebook is I can easily turn it around, I can tap, I can hold it, we can go through a presentation. Now, there are some parts of my presentation where I might like to be online so I can actually show them an example online, but I also have a printed version, which I'm going to show you. It has pretty much the same information. Now, one of the things you're going to need is to be able to talk about what's going on in the market. That assumes you're paying attention to what's going on in the market. Now, the material we're going to cover next week on the art of the CMA we'll talk about that, but you ought to have in your mind, and I put this every month, every week, but you ought to have memorized what 3 or 4 data points. And by the way, if I were going to zip code 95123, I would want to know what was going on in 95123. Next week, when I get into the CMA, I'm going to discuss the different things that I would take, including the CMA, but other materials, printouts. I have a special export that I do from the MLS, which is critical in talking about valuation of the property. All right. You should have visual presentations. You don't have to show everyone your whole presentation. One of the mistakes that people make is they get into the presentation. And so it's basically, okay, folks, sit back, get comfortable. This is going to take a while. And let me start at the beginning, right? I was born in a small, they probably don't want to hear it. One of the most useful comments I got when I was starting in real estate, which was, as you could probably guess, 100 years ago, was one of the mentors that I worked with used to say, only talk about what's important to the seller and nothing else, right? Because the more you talk about things that are not important to the seller, the more likely you are to shoot yourself in the foot, metaphorically speaking, right? So a lot of times what I'm going to do is customize my presentation to focus on the things that they say are important to them, right? So you should have, we want them where to sit. I've already done that. The location should be the kitchen table. I've already done that. I think I duplicated that. You want to be able to maintain eye contact. I've already discussed that. That's a little bit more. There's a price setting module, which we're going to talk next week. You could have a little summary. You'll see in one of my example of what I use when I do a listing appointment, where you could put in a little summary of what's going on in the market, but you ought to know what are on the market, properties that have sold recently. If there's any expired listings, I would know what they are. You should know how many days are on the market, average length of time, comparables, photos, things like that. Next week, I'm going to really delve in to the CMA. And by the way, when I talk about doing the comparative market analysis, I'm going to talk about 5 different ways to value property. One of them is a comparative market analysis. Plus, there's a bunch of other things that go beyond the comparative market analysis, the standard RPR form or the standard thing that you get out of the multiple listing service that you ought to take with you when you have the pricing conversation. Objections. You should expect them, right? You should be as agreeable as possible. Don't interrupt them. Don't jump to conclusions. You should talk slowly and softly. There's something about mirroring, labeling, and matching, which we may talk about. I may do a special class on that. But if they have an objection, you want to repeat. This is a form of mirroring what their objection was, not word for word, not the whole thing, but just a couple of the words, right? One, think it over, right? And we'll talk about handling objections in its own class. I have a class about closing and handling objections, which is going to come up. Keep it simple. Try to talk about the data. Don't get attached to the desired outcome. In other words, they can smell fear and they can smell anxiety, and it's harder to get them to agree to work with you if you're wiggling around and sweating and you're nervous and you're arguing with them and all that sort of stuff. I've gone on so many appointments over the years that one of the things that I think is valuable for me is the pretty much total lack of feeling when I go on a listing appointment. I'm not nervous or anxious or, it's just, it's just another appointment. And remember, it's not about you, it's about them. So we want to negotiate. So if they raise an issue that's interesting, can you tell me more about that? Why is that? What about that is important to you? How did you come up with that price? These are questions that you might want to ask. Again, we'll spend more time on it. And then one of the things that sometimes I do, but sometimes I don't, I'm just saying it kind of depends upon the feel. But if you're looking to, and by the way, my presentation would be different if I know it's a competitive presentation. By a competitive, one of the agents that I was coaching had gotten an appointment. She was doing an open house. A neighbor walks in. She's a good talker, a very successful agent now. She got an appointment because the guy wanted to sell his house. After she got the appointment, she told him that, she said, I have to admit, I've never listed a home and sold it, but she said she sold that I was going to come, right? And that you got to meet my guy. He's been in the business for a long time, knows a lot about real estate. And so he was okay with that because I was going to show up. When we showed up, we find out that we are one of 6 agents that he's talking to, right? There was us and 5 others, right? Now that's a competitive listing appointment, right? He was talking to agents from Keller Williams. He was talking to a Coldwell Banker agent. He was talking to an Intero agent. He was talking to a flat fee broker. He was talking to a local independent, right? Just about one of everything, right? So my approach is different if it's a competitive environment. If it's not a competitive environment, and by the way, most of the time, according to the surveys done by the National Association of Realtors, they're only talking to one agent. And yes, on the phone, I ask them, are you talking to other agents? And if they say yes, I'd say, wonderful, who, why them, right? I'm interested in knowing. Now, if I know that this is a competitive situation, then I might go through this, right? And by this, I mean, how does somebody win with you? How does somebody lose with you? What do you consider to be good customer service? I ask a lot of questions. Now, one of the things that I learned is that if we were going to rate a listing presentation on a scale of 0 to 10, with obviously 10 being the best and 0 being, 0, what would a 10 listing presentation look like? And the answer is you're letting them talk 90% of the time, and you're talking and asking questions 10% of the time. And if you ask people enough questions, they will tell you what you need to do to get the listing. I've had a lot of new agents go with me on listing appointments. Many times they were disappointed, but not because I didn't get the listing, right? Not because it didn't work, because they never got to hear a presentation. It seemed like all I kept doing is asking them questions. Have you ever sold a house before? Right? Yes. What did you like about the process? What didn't you like? What is it that what are you expecting from a real estate agent? What is the things that you would like the agent to do? What don't you like them to do? What would you say is most important to you in deciding which agent you're going to work with? Why do you think that is important? Why is that important to you? Can you tell me more about that? You understand, if I keep asking enough questions, they're going to tell me, usually, eventually, what it is they're looking for and give me a roadmap. How about that? A roadmap for what I ought to talk about in my presentation. For example, if I've asked somebody, have you ever sold a house before? What did you like? What didn't you like? And they say, oh, they did open houses. It was such a pain. We had to leave every weekend. And our neighbors would come over and say that the agents weren't even trying to sell our house. All they were trying to do is to get clients. And so I think that that was a terrible thing. And I never want to be in that situation again. Now, is that an important thing for me to know before I talk about my 7-level open house strategy, right? Which you're going to notice in my presentation, I don't really talk about open houses because as of right now, we're not doing them, right? But you understand, if they told me that, I ain't going to talk about open houses. Not until after I've listed their house. And by the way, every time I've had a seller tell me they don't like open houses, do we have to have open houses? I always say, no, no, you don't. And every time I've convinced them to do open houses, right? Because I've explained why it's valuable to them, that it would be less of a hassle. We could process people through in, one day or two, rather than having them, the death of 1,000 cuts, right? Where one wants to see it and another one this time. Yeah. You get the idea, right? So how does somebody win with you? How does somebody lose with you? What do you consider good customer service? How often do you want to be communicated with? If there's nothing happening, I want them to tell me as much as possible. And by the way, those of you that are in my coaching program, mentoring program, on my production team, in the document library, you have access to a list of questions, which is a longer list of questions than you will ever ask. You just have to you got to read them, you got to be good at asking questions. Closing. Now, one of the things that I really believe in is, and I'm looking to get a speaker on this subject, is a big mistake that I believe traditional sales has, is they're always pushing for yeses. Always pushing for yes. There's even some guy down in Southern California who's got a YouTube channel and a coaching program, and he actually calls his business Yes Masters. And I just had somebody ask me, how do you get access? And you have access if you are go through your email and search for the term document library, right? You've been sent a link to it. And if you're in my group, that means mentoring, coaching, production team, or any of those things, send an email to me, because those of you that know, I have an assistant who will reply, but most of you have been given access already. You just may not know it, right? So back to I think it's a terrible name for a company. Yes Masters. I just think it's a horrible name. And the whole idea of Yes Masters is what's called momentum selling, which is the idea if I get you to say a whole bunch of yeses, then you're going to just keep saying yeses because you're like stuck in the yes mode. Isn't it a nice day today? Yes, right. And I'm not going to go through a whole bunch of them because my mind just locked up a little bit. But I asked a whole bunch of little yeses and then say, all right, will you list your home with me for 7% commission, right? With the idea that they're going to say yes because they've said yes so many times. That's BS. And there's a great book out called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, and his stuff is based upon another guy, and which is about start with no. And what the idea behind this is that it's easier to move forward with no's than it is yeses. Easier to move forward with no's than yeses. So for example, are you ready to list your home with me tonight? Right. Now, most of the time, a question like that is sort of a pushy, salesy, and people are going to react to it because they know that if they say yes, that something else is coming. Any reason not to move ahead tonight? Now, you understand what we're looking for is a no. It's easier to get a no than it is to get a yes. And by the way, we're going to have a class on this, right? Later when I get to objections and things like that, we're going to talk about how to frame some of the traditional sales lines so that we're not pushing for a yes, but we're pushing for a no. That means, would it be ridiculous for me to assume that we're going to be able to work together, that I'm going to list your house? Is it ridiculous for me to think that? And people are much like saying, no, it's not ridiculous. No, they're more likely to do that than say yes. So that's a different class. All right. So that, I believe, is that. Now, what I've given you a copy of one of these, and I have two versions. Though some of you have my PowerPoint, I know I've done copies of the handouts, but if you're in, again, that list of people, the exalted list of people, right? The ones that are in my coaching program, mentoring program, or on my production team, There's the actual PowerPoints there, which you can download from Google Drive and modify yourself. So this is one of the PowerPoints that I use, and this is what I would use if I were showing up, doing the presentation using a laptop or tablet. I like Chromebooks, right? It's bigger than your normal tablet. It flips around. It can be a slate tablet. I just like them. Now, what I would recommend that you do is you don't need to have my logo. And what I typically would do is I might delete the logo. And what I would put in here is a picture of their house, right? I would have a picture of their house. And oftentimes in a footer, or at least at the beginning of here, I might actually have their address, a picture of their house and the address. It's a great big EXP logo. If you don't like that, I don't care. Right. One of the things that I found, and I worked at Keller Williams, I was a productivity coach at Keller Williams for 7 years. I was the director of training for Century 21 for Northern California and Northern Nevada for 5 years. It was a while ago. And I was a vice president of a large Century 21 group. I'm with EXP. And what I know is that if you're at Compass, and if you're at Coldwell Banker, or if you're at Intero, or if you're at EXP, or if you're at Keller Williams, they'll give you listing presentation materials. Most of it is crap, right? I'm just saying, most of it is crap. And the reason most of it is crap is because all of the institutional listing presentation material is designed to sell the brand. Right? Designed to sell the brand. Is that important to the seller? According to the surveys by the National Association of Realtors, they asked sellers what was important about picking the agent when they sold their home. 1% of the time, they said company affiliation. 1% of the time, they said company affiliation. Do you understand? For most of the time, they don't care. Now, EXP is in the news. In fact, today, Glenn Sanford and Grant Cardone were doing a fireside chat. We've gotten a lot of buzz because Grant Cardone is now working with EXP. We're international. We've been called the Amazon of real estate and all of that other kind of stuff. And you'll notice I don't talk about any of that in my presentation. If somebody said to me, well, can you tell me about EXP Realty and a little bit more, I might talk about that, but this is not important. I'll give you an example. I started farming in an area of Blossom Valley, and it was relatively easy. So like many agents, I decided I'm going to go to a higher end area. Right. And so in our market, some of you are not in my market, but that area was called Almaden. And all of a sudden, everything was a lot harder, right? It was a lot harder. There was a lot more agents marketing. And I was constantly going on listing appointments. And there was a team at that time that was the #1 agents in Almaden. They were running full page ads in the newspaper. They were marketing to everybody. Their signs were all over the place. And I was constantly being asked, right? One of the objections is, well, we don't see a lot of your signs in the area, but we see a whole lot of their signs, right? So, because I'm asking why, who are you thinking about, what's important here? Well, they're selling most of the homes in the neighborhood. So we're thinking maybe we ought to, maybe we ought to list with them because they're the ones selling most of the homes. So what I learned to do, and this is related to an earlier question, is I would ask them, you remember when I asked you about why you bought this home? Remember that 12 years ago, right? When you bought this home, you said you bought the home because the backyard or the school district or the kitchen, or whatever it was they said. So I would say to them, remember that, right? Those were the reasons. I said, so do you remember who the listing agent was when you bought this home? Do you remember who the listing agent was? They oftentimes look at each other. I understand they may know the name of their agent, even some of them don't know that. But they may never have met the listing agent, right? They don't know the name of the listing agent. Zillow doesn't put the listing agent's name. It puts one of their hacks, right? Instead of the listing agent's name. And so they look at each other and they're like, no, not really. And one time I remember the couple, they looked at each other and the wife said, it was Linda, I think, something like that. I said, oh, great, right? So Linda, do you remember the company that Linda, was with when you bought the home? And sometimes they'd look at each other and they're frowning like, I'm irritating them somehow. And they would say, I think it was a blue sign, maybe it was Coldwell Banker. And I'd say, great. So Linda maybe was the listing agent and Coldwell Banker was the listing office. So I'd like could you explain to me how Linda and Coldwell Banker got you to buy this house? Explain how they did that, how they convinced you to buy the house. Now, they usually look at each other and they had nothing to do with it. I mean, they'd already told me why they bought that house, right? Because they liked a bunch of things, but they never mentioned the name of the company or the listing agent. And then I'll say, well, I know you probably looked at more than just this house. When you bought this house, there's probably 2 or 3 others you were thinking about, and they're nodding. And I said, so I want to ask you this. If these other ones, the ones you didn't buy, I want you to remember what they look like, only now imagine that there's a Coldwell Banker sign with Linda's name on it. Would that have changed your mind as to which house you're going to buy? And they're like, no, it had nothing to do with it, right? And so then I look around, like it's a conspiratorial thing, and I don't want anyone to be listening. And I'll say, and believe me, I say this, I'm going to tell you a secret that most real estate agents will not tell you. The secret is that real estate agents don't sell houses. Houses sell houses. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't provide a valuable service, but just like when you bought the house, you didn't care who the listing agent was, you didn't care about the company the listing agent worked for. Do you think that's going to be different this time? You think a buyer is going to say, well, we really like that house, but the listing agent hasn't won any sales awards, so maybe this isn't the right one for it. Nobody cares. So the point is, this is how you compete against an agent that has more market share than you. And I've actually said to people, if they are telling you that your house is going to sell because their name is on it, right? Either they, what if 2 things are true? Number one, they know that's not true and they're just lying to you. Right? Because many real estate agents are good at personal promotion, but that doesn't mean they're good at property promotion. They're good at mailers to the neighborhood to get other people to list their home with them. That's what they're good at. That does not mean they're good at selling the house. And what we're going to want to do is to get, and I would say to people, maybe you ought to pick the agent not based upon what they say about themselves, but what they're going to actually do to help you sell your home. You understand, if you can articulate that, now what you're doing is you're getting the seller to pick the agent based upon the marketing plan. So what happens when you're competing with agents who have a high percentage of the listings in the area? I think I was talking about that, especially if they have been in touch with the clients through their CRM. Yeah, I think I've covered that. They're very good at that. They're good at marketing, they're good at personal promotion, they're good at following up. That does not mean they're good at selling the house, because none of those things matter to the buyer, right? It didn't matter to you when you bought the house, it's not going to matter again. The fact that agents are good at listing does not mean they're good at selling, right? It does not mean that, right? All right, just a little bit. All right, so then, this is the version that I would use if I were, talking to people. Now, I would, when I ask them about what are their goals, what do they want to accomplish? Now, this may be old school, but there are usually three things that people are looking to do to get the most money in the right time frame with the least inconvenience. Now, what you need to understand from this slide is that these are competing goals. For example, to get the highest price possible might affect the time frame and convenience. Does everybody understand what I'm saying? I went on a listing appointment and the house was walking distance to one of the top rated high schools in Santa Clara County. And they had owned it forever and their kids had moved out, and it was a 3-bedroom house, and one of the bedrooms they had converted into a sauna. You know, they got a big plastic thing and you could go sit in the bedroom, and they had piles of stuff all around the house. And I was saying, well, you know, the people that are likely to buy this house are going to want that bedroom and the sauna. And the guy said, I'm not going to do anything. I'm like, nothing? He said, I do not want to do anything. Right? I'm not going to remove the sauna. I'm not going to want to pick up stuff. Can you work with that? The answer is yeah. Absolutely. You don't have to do anything. You do realize, however, that that may affect the price you're going to get. And they're like, well, I don't care. I'm not going to do anything. Does everybody understand what I'm getting at? Right? In order to get the highest price possible, we might need enough time, and it might be inconvenient. Right? It just might be. Right? And for some people, to get the most money is their goal, and they're willing to put up with the inconvenience and the time. And then this is just a little bit how families make the decisions, seamless and stress-free. That's just, 4 factors in every sale. There's price, there's exposure, there's the presentation, and then there's the managing of the details, right? Those are the 4 parts. Now, this is just a slide about how is the market. And I might include a little bit here if I was, but usually the market information is going to be in my CMA, which is usually a separate document, but which I probably have already talked to them, because almost every time the first thing they say is, we want to know what our house is probably worth, right? And so I'm going to cover this next week, but this is what I always say to sellers. There are 3 ways to price your home. One way, which is likely to produce the greatest net income to you, the greatest net return to you, and sell in the quickest time, is the we're having a sale approach. And in the we're having a sale approach, we're going to deliberately list your property below where we think it's going to end up, so that we can create a frenzy, right? So people will be like anthills, right? People trying to show the property, cramming in. We're likely to get more offers. We could get 30 offers in this market. We could get more than that. We're more likely to get offers without contingencies, which are escape hatches for the buyer to get out. We're going to get more cash offers, more non-contingent offers, more high offers, a better net if we do it that way. We start low so that it creates a frenzy. The more people want it, the more people want it. Option number 2 is called Price is Right. And in Price is Right is where we look at all the numbers, we look at all the comps, we look at your receipts for everything you've done to fix up the house. You take out your slide rule. I don't know, right? I guess that's a little, and you figure out what you think the perfect price ought to be for your house, and then we list it at that and we stick to it, right? And we don't budge. And sometimes that doesn't work. And sometimes it does, but we're not going to get anywhere near the number of offers we would with the first strategy. Plus, we're going to more likely get offers with contingencies. And then the final strategy is called the needle in the haystack. And in that strategy is where we price the property way above where we think it's going to sell for, just in case some crazy person happens to wander in and decide to buy it, right? We oftentimes refer to those as expired listings, right? So now the reason why that discussion is important is because I'm really pushing the first strategy. And some of the information I'm going to share next week is how is it that I'm able to prove to them that that is the best strategy, which involves exporting some information locally from the multiple listing service, right? And I'm going to show you how to do that. But if we go with the first strategy, price low to sell high, you understand we're going to get offers. We're not going to have to worry about it. And we don't have to hit it right on the number, right, in terms of the price. I will point out to them, based upon that other information that I'm going to show you how to get next week, is that if you use prices right in a market where people are used to bidding over the list price, buyers will wonder, how much do you really want? If you put your home on the market for 1.5 because you want 1.5, buyers are going to be thinking, oh my gosh, they must want 1.7 or 1.8, right? It's not worth that. Right, you understand we have to know what the game is. And by the way, those patterns vary by zip code and city, and they vary over time. But that's all I'm going to do about pricing at this point, right? So I explained to them that there are 3 phases in selling your home. The first phase is the most important phase. It's pre-marketing, and it could last 1 to 3 weeks. Marketing would be 2 to 6 weeks, closer to 2. And contract to closing, that phase could be 4 to 5 weeks. So in pre-marketing, we're going to want to get inspections, property inspection, or a termite inspection. If there's a pool inspection. We're going to want to get all the inspections and reports, the natural hazard disclosure. We're going to want to get all of them. And what I would point out to them is that if we don't have all of those, then what that will mean is that it'll be less likely for a buyer to make a non-contingent offer. And I'll explain to them what it means. A contingent offer means if we don't do the inspections, then the buyer is going to do the inspections. And what will happen is they may find things and then want to renegotiate the price in the middle of escrow. And the seller, I don't want to do that. I'm going to renegotiate. Right. So if we get a termite inspection, a property inspection, the chimney inspection, the roof inspection, the foundation inspection, the pool, we get all of that in advance, and we can give it to the buyers before they make an offer, they're far more likely to make the offer without any contingencies. And their pricing of the home will already assume whatever those defects are. But if we get into contract for 1.2 and then they find all these things that are wrong with the property, their argument is going to be, we did not know about any of that stuff when we offered you 1.2, and they're going to want to renegotiate. We also want to get all the disclosures together. We want to get all that paperwork together, because if we can give that to the buyer before they make an offer, they can't use that as a way to get out. I like for sellers to be at least presented with the option of having a home warranty in case something breaks. And I'll explain to them that once it's over, you don't want the buyer suing you in small claims court. Providing a home warranty is just insurance if something breaks that's big during the listing period. And I, by the way, would take copies of home warranty brochures. Usually I would take 3, and I would show them to people. I would stick that in the material. Some of you heard me talking about home warranties when I had a guest speaker. Once we've done and people are asking me if they can get a recording. Yes, you can send me $5. I'll send you, yes. Those of you that registered will be getting a copy of it. If you're in my coaching program, the mentoring program, or on my production team, I'll help you individualize this for yourself. After we've done that, well, we're going to, and somebody's saying, aren't they usually picked by the buyer's agent in this competitive market? Not if the seller already has one. The reason that buyer's agents are picking the home warranty is because sellers oftentimes don't have one. But if the seller already has one and says that the buyer is going to get one, I've never heard of a buyer arguing and wanting a different one. And one of the things I point out to sellers is that in real estate agents have malpractice insurance. It's called errors and omissions insurance. And that if I have a transaction and I point out to them, this insurance protects me, but it doesn't protect you. But if I have a home warranty in a transaction, the amount of the E&O, the errors and omissions insurance deductible, is reduced. The insurance company gives us a monetary break if we have a home warranty on the property when it's sold. Can you understand why they would do that? And the reason is because if something breaks afterwards, people are going to just submit it to the home warranty and not file a lawsuit. So when your home closes, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, would you like to have some sort of assurance that you're not going to be getting small claims court actions or other kinds of complaints, right? That's why I would do it. If you don't want to do the home, don't talk about it. But I'll tell you the problem if you don't talk about it to the seller. Something breaks during the listing period or while you're getting ready. Something breaks, like the heater. And you say to them, wow, well, we can't sell a house without a heater, so you're going to have to fix that. And then the husband or wife or both of them at work, some person asks them at work, so how's the sale of your home going? And they say, gee, not as good as we had hoped. Our heater broke. And now we're going to have to buy a new heater before we put it on the market. I've actually been involved with other agents who had this problem, because then the friend at work says, well, why don't you just turn it over to the home warranty company? Don't you have a home warranty? I mean, when I sold my house, I had a home warranty. And then they're, oh, really? Do you mean there's a home warranty? So then they call, you're the listing agent, and they call you up and they say, by the way, we were told that we could just submit the broken heater to the home warranty company. Can we do that? Can we? And you're going to say, no, we don't have one. And they're going to say, well, why don't we have one? And you're going to say, well, usually the buyer's agent picks it for the buyer, and I don't push it for sellers. I don't know. And then you're going to hear something like this. If you had given us that option, if you had told us that we could have a home warranty, we would have bought it. And the only reason we don't is because you didn't tell us, and we want you to pay the cost. By the way, I would rather, as a listing agent, just pay for it myself. It's not that expensive, right? You understand? And I've had people where I gave them, because I would make the sellers usually pay for it, but in this market, I paid for it myself. I've had cases where I gave them home warranty brochures and they said, no, right? We don't think it's worth it. And then their heater broke, right? Now that's a very different discussion, because they know I had mentioned it and they had turned it down. It got so bad at one time, I actually would have people initial that they were turning down the home warranty. Now I would just pay for it if I were the listing agent, right? It's billed to escrow, it's not that much. Because now you're the hero if something big breaks. So then after we've done that, I didn't expect to talk about home warranties that long. Repairs, cleaning, and staging, right? This is the sequence. Once we've done that, right, painted what needs to be painted, cleaned what needs to be cleaned, staging, we'll talk more about that. That's when you have photos and a virtual tour. I like to have a drone fly around, right? A 3D virtual tour, professional photos. I don't go and take photos with my phone, right? Because I'm not good at taking photos. I hire a professional photographer to go take the pictures. Then once we've got the photos, the virtual tour, we're in a position to prepare marketing materials. And then notice the last step in the pre-marketing is a pricing strategy. And the reason that even though we may have talked about it today, this could be 3 weeks, could be 4 weeks before the house is ready to be put on the market. Is it possible that pricing has changed between today and when we actually put it on the market? So we're going to revisit that, look at what's the competition, look at what's happening to the market. Home warranties, wow. So my selling strategy. Now you'll see in one of the handouts which I've shared with you for free is a more detailed marketing plan. But, and I oftentimes will connect that to RPR, whatever, but one of the things I point out to them, this comes from the 2020 profile of home buyers and sellers, which is the National Association of Realtors. And they broke this down between people using a desktop and a mobile device. I'm not really too sure why, but that's what they did. And I don't know. So what this survey does is it asked buyers how they found the home they bought. Notice 52 to 55% of the time they found it on the internet. And by the way, if you I have a question, you put the price in the listing agreement, what is the correct way to change the price? That's called an amendment, right? And there's a difference between the price and the listing. We can change the price on the listing agreement, right? You put down a price, but when it's time to put it on the market and we need to adjust the price, we use a form for that. So when asked, how did you find the home you bought, 52 to 55% said on the internet. I'm shocked that it's that low, right? But it might be even higher in our area. 29 to 26% said that they found the property through a real estate agent. Now that's important. You'll notice that the internet and real estate agents are the bulk of how people found the property. Yard sign in an open house, right? Maybe we'll do them again. Friend, relative, or neighbor. We would like to assist our sellers in promoting their own listing. Home builder, that's for new homes. They directly from the sellers or know the sellers, 2% print advertising, home, do they have home books? I don't know. Now, one of the things I also point out to them, and this is also from that survey, is that even though people found the property on the internet, most of the buyers use a real estate agent, right? 88 to 90%. The number of buyers that are buying the property without a real estate agent is actually very low. That may or may not be a slide you need to talk about, but sometimes I've had people say, well, gee, if they're finding it on the internet, maybe they don't use an agent. That's just not it. So I always say there's two groups of people we're going to market to. We're going to market to the public and we're going to market to other real estate agents, right? And the way we market to the public is there's a yard sign, there's brochures, a single property website. Right? If you don't have one, you need one in this market. I was using them a long time ago, right? A really long time ago, and it allows you to have a whole bunch of different things on the site. You can pictures and virtual tours and things like that. We're going to do social media marketing. It's going to be on 500 plus websites. There's going to be open houses. There's going to be an email blast. Everybody that's in my database that I've been working with, 4,000 plus, we're going to send it to, just listed announcements, because there's a certain percentage of people that find out from the neighborhood, whatever, international buyers. And if they want to talk about that, there's two different, and it's in my marketing plan, there's two different companies that I've used to market it international, Proxio, and another one which I'd have to think about. All right, digital marketing. That should have been a little bit different, but anyhow, that, by the way, was a picture of a house. Now, if that was their house, that was a picture of an actual listing appointment I went on. That's what the beautiful house looked like. And we're going to give you the most exposure, multiple sites, virtual tours, email newsletter to my 4,000 database, right? See, isn't that cute? You know, that's there. And that, by the way, would be a picture of their house. The digital footprint, right? It's going to go on all the major real estate sites, things that you've never heard of. Everybody in the world is going to know that your home is for sale. Now, when I was doing virtual open houses for a while, they don't really work out that well. I probably wouldn't go through this slide. Originally, when COVID hit, we thought that we would do walkthroughs, and I was doing them with Zoom or Google Meet or something like that, and it never really worked very well. But you could still talk, I would still talk about it in the sense that I would do a virtual open house walkthrough, right? Where I would stand in front of the house and I would talk about the neighborhood and what's going on with the neighborhood. And then, you know, this is like the selfie sort of a thing. And I'd say, let's go look at the house. And then I would walk through the house and talk about everything and open the doors and things like that, right? Now, when we can do open houses, I'm going to change the slide to about open houses. This is a slide about, and these slides, these two slides are while we're still in we're not doing real open houses, and it's more difficult to show the property. This is a survey that was done by Realtor.com about what kinds of things buyers were using in terms of navigating the home buying process and what they were looking for. And we're going to incorporate all of those strategies. Right now, a 3D walkthrough tour. Now there's different, you can do a virtual tour, which is you could use photographs and things like that. They look very nice, got music in the background. I've got examples of those. But let's say this is an expensive house or even a decent house. I might have a 3D walkthrough tour. That's a screenshot of one. If I was actually at somebody's house with my trusty little tablet, right, I would actually show them something like this, right? If they've never seen one, I would actually show them of what that looks like, right? So that people can do a walkthrough three-dimensional tour. Now, in the printed version of this, we just use that first, picture, but because, it's printed and they can't see this, but does everybody get the idea? By the way, this is embedded in the PowerPoint that I have for people that are in my coaching program, mentoring program, or on my production team, just saying, right, just saying, all right, just saying. Home staging, again, if they want to get the most money possible. So the way I found some of these pictures, I went to this website, it's called Google, and I went to Google Images and I typed in home staging before and after. And by the way, this is an empty one, there's some pictures that you could see of houses that are filled with stuff, but how long does it take a buyer to decide if they want to buy the house? Not very long. We don't get a second chance to make a first impression. If you want to net the most money possible, we go through all this, we get it staged professionally. If you want to know what the goal is, go to a new home subdivision and look at their pictures. They've spent a lot of money and time in analyzing what gets people to buy properties and to spend more and staging. People will walk in and it's an emotional decision. They'll decide pretty much right away if they want to buy it or not. Now, in addition to marketing to the public, we need to market it to other agents. And that's not just through the MLS exposure. There's a thing called reverse prospecting, which allows you to identify which agents in the multiple listing service are running searches for buyers for which this property would fit, and I'm going to reach out to them. There are tours. I'm going to pitch it at the meeting. I'm going to personally promote it to agents that are selling property in the area, the real estate board. Part of our marketing, because almost 30% of the buyers said they found the home through their agent. We want to include them. You might do an email blast to agents. That would be personal promotion. You can sort of talk about what you want to do. In communication, when we get an offer, we'll give you an estimate of what your proceeds are likely to be. We're going to give you a complete market analysis of what your home is worth. We're going to provide education about things that are going on, keeping you informed, providing feedback whenever the property is shown, activity reports of what's going on, monitoring the market. You're going to get a schedule of events. If we do this right, this isn't going to take very long, right? The longest part of this is the pre-marketing part, getting the property ready. If we do it right, I'm seeing homes going on the market on Wednesday within 7 days, they're taking offers. That's why I'll tell people we do this. We don't have to have it staged forever, right? If you have the right pricing strategy and you get it staged, tell them go away for the weekend, right? We want it vacant. We want to be showing it as soon as we can, all day long. We want to just pump them through so that we can get the best offers. And then once we get an offer, we're going to present it. We're going to help you negotiate. We're going to monitor the transaction. We are on your side. That's what fiduciary means. Our job is to get you the best price and the best terms, and we're going to manage all the details in closing. And then there, you have to leave my picture, however, but you could change that, right? Now, one of the things that I've also done for those of you that are in my coaching mentoring program is, and again, this is in the document library. This is the one I just showed you was really designed for something like a tablet. This is landscape 8.5 by 11, right? And if you don't like the logos, again, I would generally be removing the logos. You don't need mine, but I would have a picture of the property, right? Rather than the big company logo. I didn't have a property, so I just put in a big logo. I would probably make the logo a little bit smaller, a picture of the property, but that was just something I did. And then pretty much this is the same kind of a thing, but it's in a version you could print out. I might make a portrait version of it. That means, you know, a vertical one, but I have found that doing the landscape works better because of some of the different things, some of the different items. It works better, and it also looks different. And anyhow, that's sort of what my presentation looks like. All right, I think we've gone on. I've gone on and on and on, right? So if you're not in my coaching, mentoring, or on my production team, and you would like to have access to cutting edge marketing materials, plus somebody that would help you modify them and work on the scripts and help you become successful in listing properties, reach out to me. There is help, right? And I might be able to help you. That's all I've got for today. Next week, we're going to be doing a class on using your CRM for automated marketing and following up. That's going to be on Wednesday. And next Thursday will be the art of the CMA and 5 different ways to determine a property's value. Don't miss it. That's all I got, guys. Stay safe out there. Talk to you later.